Like I had a Youth of Today record, had no idea they were straight edge. I had no idea what the X's on their hands meant. I thought they just made it up as like a thing, like Kiss wears makeup. Youth of Today puts the X's on their hands is like a thing.
Welcome everyone to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Uprise was a hardcore band based out of northern New Jersey. Their members were Matt, Frank, Drug-Free Mike Z, and I forget the other names because they don't have them on Discogs, so you guys may want to update that. I heard about them when Mike Z joined the band because he showed up to lunch one day at Jefferson Township High School, where he was a classmate of mine, and he brought the Uprise 7-inch, and I had never seen that before. I didn't know a local band could put out records, and that opened my mind up to all of the possibilities that were ahead of me with my band Lanemeyer, which I talk about in this interview. You may also remember the Morris County Youth Crew from back in the day, which Matt formed. That name has come up a few times in other interviews, especially the episode 23 interview with Brian Malloy, who talks about the Morris County Adult Crew, which we also talk about in this interview. By the way, I actually made some merch for that, so you can check out thiswasthescene.com and go to the store, and you can find it. I also have a link in the show notes if you want to just click there. The direct link is thiswasthescene.com/product-tag /MCAC. Yeah, just go to Matt's interview page, which is going to be on the website, or just click on the store and you'll find it. I got Matt on the phone, and this is what we talk about. Hair metal, growing up in Morristown, straight edge, Gorilla Biscuits, his band Downfall, the Music Den in Jefferson, the NJ Impossibles, replacing Fortitude with Uprise on a show, the Morris County Adult and Youth Crew, Ben from Dillinger Escape Plan being in the band, Frank Cappuccio, their 7-inch being pink, Hello Bastards artwork ripping off another album, and a ton more. In this interview, I forgot the name of a band when we're talking about the Music Den, but that band name was Drop Zone. So I was trying to figure it out at the time. I didn't, but I wanted to mention it here. So spoiler alert, but it's Drop Zone. Check out Matt's other bands, which are Dead Nation and Kissing as a Crime. Both are available on Spotify to download. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by visiting the website and just click on donate, or you can buy merch, or you can sign up for $1 a month, which is in the navigation on top of the webpage. And that's all I want to talk about. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Well, Laura Stuss is her last name now.
Yes, but Laura Ladishef in our hearts.
Yeah, but Laura Ladishef is how she will always be remembered by the people from the scene. Did she say that you are still involved doing local shows at Boonton?
No.
Because I know it's one of her friends I know her friend Beth. She still goes sometimes there, but she said that you are playing still. Obviously, you just talked about the goldfish in your coffee mug.
Yeah. I've lived in Brooklyn for the last 16 years, so I still am involved in music. It's just not.
You're not taking the ride to Boonton?
Not taking the ride to Boonton, and you know my music worlds have kind of spun over a few different times and turned into different genres, or whatever you want to call it, of underground kind of music cultures. So
I mean, have you stayed consistently with a band for this whole time?
I've kind of consistently stayed within music for sure. I did bands, I did bands after my punk bands. I did Uprise during the days of the Boonton Nights and stuff. And then I did another band called Dead Nation, and I was still in high school. We were a little more New York City based, and by that point the kind of local band scenes kind of changed. I think it was a little more I don't know. I think maybe just the direction we were going in was more of the shows that were kind of happening. We weren't like a spiky hair drunk punk band, but that was like a little bit of our world, and crust punk was a little bit of our world. So we didn't really play New Jersey too often in our few years of a band, and that was my last real punk band. And then after that, I kind of did more what I guess you'd call like indie pop, indie rock or something, and then kind of going on further in that direction.
We're basically going to just, obviously, like we always do, is talk about the late 90s scene and kind of like I think talking about Uprise for anyone listening, I'm sure you remember Uprise and the Morris County Youth Crew, which you want to talk about. I'm just so fascinated by this because I've mentioned him a bunch of times. When Mike Ziobro, he went to high school with us, and the first time, like, so he was always the guy that was about like I don't know, 10 steps ahead of us in music, and he was pretty much think he was the one who educated Barker, who was in my band Lanemeyer,
Yeah.
about just music because he would come in and because his sister would pass along music to him, and then he'd come into. I remember like ninth grade, he came into gym class and he had a Fugazi shirt, or it said like "This is not a Fugazi shirt," and we all thought it was like. And I said in another episode, we all thought it was like he was a Nazi
Hmm.
because it's like Fugazi Nazi or something like that, and he shaved his head. So he had this weird stigma around him in the beginning of high school, or actually during middle school. And then when we got into high school, that's when Green Day broke and Rancid and all that shit. And so we're like, oh wow,
Yeah.
this guy actually knows what the fuck he's talking about. So that's when Barker, he would get recommendations from him, and he would give him like Fugazi CDs and things. And I forget what it might have been like. I doubt it was like a Fat Records bands. But anyway, Mike was, like I said, he was our bridge into knowing about this scene or hearing about it. And I remember one day he came into a lunchroom and he had your guys' 7 inch, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
And I was so blown away that a guy who was my age had like put out an album, which was just a 2 song EP or whatever
Six
they
six
call it.
songs.
Was
Six
it
songs.
6 songs on that?
Oh yeah, we fit 6 songs on it. They were all like 2 minutes long. You could fit maybe like 6 minutes or so per side, a little over 6 minutes on a 33 7 inch. So we wanted to give as much bang for our buck.
Yeah, actually, yeah. If I go to Discogs, it's got Blind, How Much Is Enough, Major Choice, Silent No Longer, This One Thing, I believe. So this is the Silent No Longer 7 inch. If anyone has that or had that, that's what we're talking about right now. So Matt here was, I mean, you were heavily involved in the scene back then, right?
Very heavily, yes. I had no other interests or life other than my like part-time job, taking up my time. It was like going to school for me. That was like my downtime because I usually just by a certain point I just cut class all the time. And I realize now looking back it was probably just to kind of decompress because I was very involved in booking shows, playing shows, just the scene, everything about it.
I'm so fascinated. This is gonna be so good. I can't wait to just like reminisce about this. So,
Yeah, yeah.
all right. So how I structure it is just go back in time, talk about what got you into music, how that led into now hardcore instead of like punk rock or I don't know whatever your gateway drug was, and we'll kind of talk about the scene and bands you played in and shit. But yeah, man, as a kid, as a young Matthew, what was the song or maybe MTV video that opened your eyes to, oh my God, I need to pay attention to music?
There's no specific thing I can point to because it's been there as long as I can remember. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, to put it into perspective, kind of big New Jersey Catholic family. So I had older siblings who played me music like I know for a fact the first band I was ever into like obsessively was The Who. I think as one of my oldest brothers was about to leave home then when I was about two and a half, three, and that was his favorite band, so I would hear them from him. My older sister, who was about 10 years older than me, she loved them. So, my mom always tells stories that the first words I learned how to write were The Who.
Oh, your first logo that you drew with like the arrow or whatever they're.
I don't even think I could draw a logo yet. I mean, like the first letters I could put onto paper before I could even write my own name was I could write The Who. Yeah, so it kind of started from them, and then like the Beatles, and then, I mean, I was ready to be like up to my eyeballs in music, even like in preschool. It was like this is what I love, like music, bands, Beatles, Who, Zeppelin when I was real little, and then it kind of grew from there. And then what was the first band I ever got into sort of on my own, and I just mean without the help of my siblings, and even though it was from the help of TV, it felt very original to me. Like I felt kind of cool that no one in my family listened to them. I got into the Monkees from their TV
Oh my
show.
God, I love that show so much.
Oh yeah.
That was the best fucking show ever.
Oh
I
yeah.
always
Oh
watched
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I mean, I was all in. I had a Monkees poster. The first band T-shirt I had was the Monkees, and I still love the Monkees. I listen to them a few times a year usually.
Oh wow.
And then my what I'm listening for changes as I get older and more musical or something, or you just look at music in a different way. I still think they had amazing songwriters. Those guys, they wouldn't have been such hits if they weren't good, you know. And there's a reason they keep kind of coming back. But not to digress too much on monkeys, but yeah, and then it just and then it was weird because like hair metal was so big. So even by like kindergarten, first grade, I really kind of got into like hair metal, and by this point, I think MTV's banned from our house because of like this video, "Boom Boom Boom, Let's Go Back to My Room."
Oh my God, I do remember that song too. Or that
Yeah,
would come on. That would come on like the stereo in the car, and it would be so uncomfortable because like my dad, you could just see he would get tense and be like, "Turn this station." Or, like,
oh yeah,
I need to hear that song now.
yeah. So that kind of was the straw that broke the MTV back in my household. Um, so then it was really just kind of buying hair metal records for the cover in record stores. It's just what guys looked cool or something. You know, who do I want to dress like when I when I grow up? And
Did
then
you
I
ever,
brought
real quick, did you ever feel like kind of bummed out when you'd get you'd get the records based on the art? Like I remember Dirty Rotten Filthy Scoundrels, I think it was from Warrant.
yeah,
And that the record would look so scary and cool, but when you heard it, you were like, this is like the pussiest shit. Like there was nothing
yeah.
strong about it. Unless it was Appetite for Destruction, then that artwork matched the album, like I thought completely.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was definitely records like that. Sometimes you just buy. Oh, you know what? Actually, the first for me was like that. So I started getting into Kiss about first, second grade,
Hmm.
and one of the earliest Kiss tapes I got was the Gene Simmons solo record. I got it on tape. I still got records, and I never stopped buying records. So I started getting vinyl when I was in kindergarten. Got my first vinyl. I never stopped. Like I never. There was never a period in my life where I didn't buy vinyl. But anyway, but I remember specifically we were going somewhere on like a little day trip. So I got it on tape so I could listen to it either in my Walkman or in the car stereo. And it was so bad and the music so didn't match the cover. I was fully convinced that it was the wrong music on the tape and somehow there was a mishap at the factory and I got the wrong music because it didn't sound like Gene Simmons. The music was like it just sounded like bad like 70s AM radio rock or something. It didn't sound like the demon from Kiss, and that was like, wow, that this is like the worst waste of money I've ever had.
Actually, real quick, I talk. I'm not gonna keep cutting you off, but like, Dan Yeeman, his interview's coming out this week, and I believe at one point he talks about liking Kiss, and I think it was his, or it might have been. There's another interview coming up after. I'm not gonna say what it is. Um, that we talked about that, and I said that I loved that song "Loud." That was on that record.
Loud by
Gene Simmons, yeah, like that was his. I think that was on his solo record.
oh, you thinking about I Love It Loud?
Love It Loud, yeah, that's such a. Is that on his solo record?
No, that's on Creatures of the Night, and that record has some really good hard rock songs. But
Okay.
oh, I
Okay.
Love It Loud is great. I think the video was kind of popularish on MTV, but that's kind of before, you know, my time of being able to watch MTV or being, oh, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that would, but yeah, no, his solo album's trash. There's nothing on,
Don't buy the record,
and it doesn't
kids.
look like he looks awesome on that cover, and the music is like for grandparents. So yeah, we all did that. You buy the record for the cover, and it sucks. Yeah, and then it's weeks before you can get to the record store and have enough money saved up or enough sympathy from your parents that you get another record. So there's times where like maybe I would get. I just remember my big metal trauma was that band Cinderella, and an older kid had Night Songs on tape, and I remember being really young and being like, "Holy crap, this is so awesome!" And then they had made this record, Long Cold Winter. I think it'd been out for a while because I had a few videos, and that was my first time buying a Cinderella tape when I was little. And it was the one single, like Gypsy Road or something, was great, and the rest of the record was phenomenally bad. And I was like, I literally kind of got into like a depression because it was like a month before I could get a new tape, and I was tired of what I had. I felt ripped off. It was like an existential crisis in like first or second grade.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a common thing for when you're in that era where you had to buy music, and now it's just there's not that level of commitment.
So what like when you got older, how old were you when you first what was your gateway into like the hardcore? Because I mean, I'm just gonna associate you with hardcore because that's the first band that I knew was you playing in Uprise, which was hardcore.
Yeah.
But was it hardcore or was it like a band? Was it like pop, like a punk band or whatever that led you to that?
It was punk rock, you know. I mean, it was all kind of the like what we now kind of call the starter set punk bands of like um the sort of like Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, Misfits. I mean, it's on the harder end, but at the time, those bands, no one really called them punk hardcore bands. They called them punk rock bands. But I got into a lot of that like popular '80s stuff, and I did. I was a metal kid. I'd been really into metal, as you know. I kind of maybe got into some hardcore and punk rock around the same time, and I kind of thought of it as one and the same, because it's all old. It's all before my time at this point, and
Well, how old was this? Like, how old were you?
I was about 11, probably getting my first punk and hardcore bands from the past on tapes before I kind of started figuring out there was modern bands still doing this, another year or two before I really started being able to go to shows and go to shows regularly and find out like, oh my God, there's this, it never fully ended. There's just world existing. And that was pretty amazing. But,
Which school? Which town did you grow up in?
I grew up in Morristown.
Wait, where? I lived there a couple of years ago. I was about where the A&P used to be, down the street from the courthouse. It's like where the Whole Foods is
Oh,
now.
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So I grew up actually in Mars Township. It's all different sections. There's Morristown, Mars Township, Mars Plains. I grew up off of a street called Hanover Avenue, near Speedwell Avenue a bit.
Yeah, that's where I was living, right down there. I know this is like completely pointless to anyone listening, but just for me, I love that area. And Morristown was like kind of beat up like back in the day too, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I lived in what would definitively be considered a white trash neighborhood.
Oh, there you go.
I think there's a lot of like Vietnam vet parents in my neighborhood, a lot of like alcoholics. So there was a lot of metal kids. So that kind of got me interested in metal at a young age, which then kind of I got bored of that or I just wanted something else. And then I found like Ramones and Misfits and, the metal bands that had come from hardcore like DRI and Suicidal Tendencies. And then they went from hardcore punk to metal. And I kind of traced those bands backwards.
So how'd you get involved in the local scene? And like how old were you?
I was probably about 12 when I started
Wow,
getting involved.
really?
Yeah. 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 It was, I mean, I was doing bands, all the bands I did, like I did a metal band and I was the youngest kid by a couple years. So, I played bass in really a death metal band. And,
Wait, at 12 years old?
mhm.
Okay, Jesus.
The thing is, which is ironic, 'cause I had a really strict mom and I had really like a lot of, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. I don't know if this venue ever has really come up much in people's podcast interviews, but there was this like cheesy holdover from the '80s rock club called Obsessions,
Oh,
and
yeah, plenty of times.
yeah, and it's like I'm so embarrassed about Obsessions because of like kind of how cheesy it was, but it really was something that like I really kind of got to meet the people who would become my tribe, and we'd split off, and you just didn't have anything else, so and $10 shows were like a lot back then, and they were a lot when you're a little kid, and we didn't have like really any money. So that $10 was like a huge investment to go see a bunch of local bands of high school kids when you're like in middle school. I kind of knew a lot of older kids and bands there, and I did like a death metal band that played Obsessions. And that's kind of how I started meeting the kids who I would find out more about. But I was dying to know as much as possible that I could have, like what bands to listen to, where eventually you could see bands, like the histories of bands, what records they had out. Like I wanted to hear all the music.
Where was Obsessions? Was that on what town?
Sussex Turnpike in
That
Randolph. Yeah.
that's it. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was like when you took Sussex from Morristown into because that would lead out to Route 10, and it was like right there. I was thought
Yeah.
Connections was there for some reason.
Connections is further out, or maybe I don't remember. I don't think I ever went to Connections. That might have been in Clifton, or
Yes, it was in Clifton. That was
yeah, that's a little closer to the city.
so at 12 years old, which means that you're in middle school in
Yes,
Morristown, and
in
you're going to
Catholic school. In Catholic school.
and Catholic school. Like that must have been fucking wild because the same thing with like Mike Ziobro when in middle school, he was just he was involved with like this music scene and these older kids where we were so far behind that I felt that maybe alienated him a little bit. Did that like do you feel like that kind of did that to you when you were in school?
Yeah, a little bit because I remember specifically once I really started going to more shows that my friends who were still into Metallica and Guns N' Roses, even though we were the same age, I kind of felt like I was like 5 years older than them. Kind of into this underground music, you guys wouldn't understand, because they just didn't pick up on it at all
Yeah.
and they didn't really understand it. And I always just felt like a weirdo. Like I can't really express how much of an outsider and a weirdo I felt like my whole life growing up. So this was sort of the first thing that made me feel a little more like I didn't feel like I'd arrived yet, but I felt like I'm on this path. I'm finding the other weirdos. I'm finding something about me that makes more sense. I was definitely had a lot of older kid influence to kind of show me bands that weren't common. And I really can't talk about this era of my life enough without mentioning my friend Dave Ackerman from Mars Knowles. So like, he went to high school with Laura Ladishef. And then my friend Cindy, who me and Cindy were the ones who first kind of started doing the boot night shows, that were the Girl Scout shows and everything. And then Dave and I were like metal. I met Dave when I was 10, and we were like metalhead kids that evolved into punk kids together.
So what does that mean? Like when you're going to Obsessions, and then when did you start going to Legion Hall shows? Or like did you put them on first, and that's how you got into it, or did you go to a few Legion Hall shows and then go, okay, now I need to put these on myself?
Yeah, exactly. I went to a few. I went to a handful.
Do you
I don't
remember
know.
them? Do you remember what they
Yeah,
were?
yeah, absolutely. Man, like I went to there because it's weird when I think of them kind of in two different categories. There's the ones with sort of the national act, if you will, for lack of a better word, like touring bands or out of
Yeah.
town bands that like are on bigger labels. And then there's sort of the ones of the local bands that like played Obsessions a little bit, but like, also played like these kind of shows and they were more local band bills. One of the earlier significant shows, like I saw this like hardcore band 108, like they were like a Hare Krishna band. They were definitively like the only hardcore band on the bill. It was in Chatham, New Jersey at the Chatham Church that did a handful of shows over the years. They probably did like one a year or two a year or something. And
Yeah, it was Chris Daly's first band.
yeah, that was Will Chris Daly, yeah, one of his first bands. But from Texas is the reason, yeah. So I saw them in middle school, and that was awesome because I could take the train there. That was one of the early ones I saw with like a headliner kind of band that wasn't just like local bands. The one that kind of really changed everything for me in middle school, and it wasn't because of the bands, it was just the whole event of it, is I saw Charles Maggio of Gurn Blanston Records put on this show of Avail. Who were on Lookout at the time, Garden Variety and Weston. And if that wasn't the first time I saw Weston, it was maybe the second.
What year was that?
This was 94.
Okay, because I'm looking at the NJPP archives, and he has got one flyer, but that's not it's like a peep show or something at Pipeline. It's like Guttermouth and Smut. I don't know those shows. Yeah, every time someone's telling me about these shows, I always try to look them up because these. Have you been to the NJPP archives?
I have a couple times, not too many.
Yeah, it's cool because it just has the flyers up there. So I always like try to be like, yep, there it is. That's the fucking show, but he doesn't have that one.
I know I found flyers for shows he did around this time because I think I found the flyer for the Avail show he did before this one. But this show was, I think, like Dahlia Seed, Garden Variety, Weston. I felt like an outsider only because I just was like still kind of a total noob compared to everyone else. I'd only been going to underground shows for like half a year or so. But and I was, again, still in middle school, so I was significantly younger than like everyone there. But that show was like, whoa, I just want to do this. I want to buy zines. I want to buy 7 inches. I want to I went vegetarian already, and like there was like selling vegetarian vegan food for like $2 at a table. It was just, I'm like, these are my weirdos.
Talk about that because Uprise's big thing. We'll get into that when you finally started that band. But you guys were straight edge, vegetarian, or was it vegan? What was
Our theme was like vegetarian. I think on and off different members would be vegan, but we were all vegetarian 100%. Like there was never, once we really got rolling, there was never anyone who wasn't vegetarian in the band, I don't think.
But there was also like the straight edge part of it.
Oh yeah, we were absolutely. And that's kind of what, when I first started going to shows, I kind of went to just sort of pan punk shows, like anything in the underground. And I think what kind of changed my course was that I became straight edge, and it really hit me with a zeal. Like I had an older brother who was in high school, and he had been like the straight A student, and he basically developed a drinking problem in high school while I'm sharing a room with him in like grade school and middle school. And that sort of freaked me out. And then when I heard about straight edge, I mean, I just heard the Minor Threat song and I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. And then when I found out, like, Matt, there's all these bands that are straight edge. Like I had a few straight edge bands records. Like I had a Youth of Today record, had no idea they were straight edge. I had no idea what the X's on their hands meant. I thought they just made it up as like a thing, like Kiss wears makeup, Youth of Today puts the X's on their hands is like a thing.
Did you feel like it kind of like solidified. It almost gave you like a solid, what's the word? It's like a lot of us in that age were trying to figure out who we were, where we belonged, and then there was that moment where something just made it concrete that you felt just you connected with the ground again. Like I stand for something, or this is what I am. This is my identity. Like, do you think straight edge, when you found those bands doing that, it just made it like this is real, and I'm a part of this, so it makes me feel like safer. I don't know if safe is the right word, but like just like it made it stronger for you that other bands, like bigger bands, were doing it.
I don't even know if that, because I wanted to be straight edge. I remember calling, how I found out about straight edge was I knew this one kid. He eventually went and did a band called So I Had to Shoot Him that got into a fight with John Hiltz at a show, but that's another story.
Wait, what's that story?
I'll come back to that. That was at Paperweight Fest.
All right, I'm gonna put a note.
Involved smashing things. There was video up for for a while. But this dude Matt Gibney, his name was, and he actually died from drugs. But he was a few years older than me, and I was still in this metal band that I'm in middle school, and they know I'm very much into punk rock, and they're trying to like not let me explore that, and they think I should just stay to metal. And I was telling him, I'm like, look, there's this Minor Threat song, Straight Edge, and like I want to make this into a thing. Like I want to do a band and like sing about this stuff and make it into this real thing. And he's like, it already is that. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, Matt Gibney, my friend, my punk rock friend that I always tell you about, and who has like punk CDs you want to borrow, like he's straight edge. I was like, that's insane. And then sure enough, Dave Ackerman's in high school, and he's like, oh yeah, I think I know a kid in my high school who's straight edge. And then I was like, what? you know, this is a thing. It's not just a Minor Threat song from, 20 years ago, whatever it was, 15. I don't know, not even that long ago. It was over a decade old at that point.
But was that exciting to you though? Like you were looking for something, or you were looking that to be a thing, and you're like it was already established, so you were like, I'm on the right path.
Yeah, I think so. And I liked stuff that had message and meaning. And even when I liked metal bands in like fifth grade or sixth grade, like if a band had a political message in one of their songs, about acid rain or about the government or something, I was like, that's cool. I like music that has meaning. And then straight edge to me really became a meaning. It really brought something, a purpose.
Yeah, that's the word I was trying to look for, a purpose. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that gives you the shit that gets you up in the morning. I mean, like I think now, just I'm talking like a 40-year-old, where I'm sometimes lost here and there. But I remember those moments where finding music or like just trying to figure out. And this is just really, I'm kind of breaking away for a second, but like when I was in high school, I didn't have like a crowd to fit in. And then when I was like, then I met my buddies, so we're still tight to this day. But once I found like Vans sneakers, and, like I don't know, like just the certain like in the Salvation Army, 'cause I was like, oh, well, this is like me, like this is like my style. And then the music, I was like, wow, I'm a thing now, instead of just like floating around and not knowing who the fuck I am. It's a weird way to like kind of, I mean, obviously straight edge is a lot more no intense, but it's more like
It is intense. There is like a kind of, it's a dogmaticness to it. And
yeah, great fucking word.
yeah, and well, that word is used constantly about straight edge. So,
I feel like straight edge was like the first CrossFit.
in a way, right? And I really loved it. I really love straight edge. And the ironic thing is, when I started hearing all the new straight edge bands that were coming out, or maybe the bands that had just come out in the few years before, I didn't necessarily love them. I thought they were not hardcore punk the way I wanted to hear. And I was very obsessed with like the 80s bands, like the late 80s straight edge bands that I was just getting into, like Gorilla Biscuits and Youth of Today and Judge and stuff. So I had no idea those bands were even broken up. It was only like 5-7 years before. And I'm like, all right, guys, when are we going to go see Gorilla Biscuits? And it's like, oh, dude, they broke up 3 years ago.
Like, what?
Are you serious? That band that good? I'm like, their shirts are everywhere. I just saw a skater drive by, wearing their shirt in a town over from me last week. How can they be broken up?
Well, that was the thing too, is like Mike would wear Gorilla Biscuit shirts, and just the name, I was like, what the fuck is a Gorilla Biscuit? I was like, this sounds weird. Like as a kid, you are so used to Poison and Def Leppard, which obviously that would sounded less weird for some reason. But all that new stuff, when you hear it, it was just like it was so foreign. I'd be like, That's weird. That's stupid. Like that, I don't get it. And then it was probably like some of the coolest shit that was going on, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of that.
So yeah, when I heard the name Gorilla Biscuits, I was like, this is weird. Like I want in on it. What is this? And it's funny because a lot of hardcore bands, whether it was Youth of Today or Sick of It All, I didn't really love them the first time I heard it. They had to grow on me a handful of listens, and I had to like get into the lyrics. But Gorilla Biscuits, the first time I heard them, I was like, wow, this is something special.
Why? What was it about it?
It was everything. The lyrics were great. The music was great. Like I heard Start Today, and yeah, it was just, I don't know, it kind of reminded me of the Descendants a bit because it was very melodic, and it was fast, but it didn't feel like some music that's real fast and real thrashy is like a little sloppy or just feels a little, I don't know. But this felt like everything was just very musical, had a purpose. The lyrics were great. It just, I don't know, it just felt really good to listen to it. And because of their like, they've been the best selling hardcore band of like actual kind of that kind of hardcore music since they've come out. I mean, I think it shows that they have something few bands did.
It almost makes sense too because if we grew up with that with hair metal, there was melody and there was a musical structure to it. Going from that to like Youth of Today, like it's a lot more raw and broken down, or Minor Threat. There's really no melody involved, so it's such a departure. Where, and this is such a stretch, but like Gorilla Biscuits are like, yeah, there is like a little bit of a bridge there where it was a bit easier.
Yeah.
You're so used to it as a kid, so when that happens, you're like, oh, okay, it's kind of like you're like, oh, this reminds me of this. But when it was super stripped down, you're like, this reminds me of nothing. I don't want to give this any more time. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
That was a. I mean, again, that's all speculation, but
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think everyone reacts to this stuff differently. I think it's like what you're prepared to hear at the time. And like further into life, I've become a music producer, but I've always had a really, really sensitive ear to production values. So like when I heard, kind of lesser recorded hardcore and punk records compared to like metal records I was listening to, I was like, this sounds like it was recorded on a boombox, and well, sometimes I wasn't ready for it. And then like a year or two later, I'd be like, oh my God, this is awesome. This sounds like it was recorded on a boombox and it's still good. Nirvana's Bleach was that for me too.
I've still never listened to that whole album.
Yeah, it's a real important record to me because it was like, they were obviously getting very, very popular when I got to hear it, but they didn't reach their like max climax of just being the most like the new Guns N' Roses in terms of popularity. So Bleach seemed very, very punk rock when I heard it as a real little kid. It kind of influenced me forever because I was like, oh my God, you can make a song with like two notes and some noise and it can still be really special.
So how did this all come together for you to join? Is Uprise the like first band that you formed when you found out about this whole straight edge thing and like started going to local shows?
No, the Uprise is the second. I did a band, oddly enough, called Downfall first. And Downfall, we only played a few shows. So I'm significantly younger than everyone in Downfall. And it's all kids from different high schools. I did that band. And we only played a few shows. And that was the band I've been writing the songs for while I'm in a metal band. I'm like, I'm going to leave this metal band and I'm going to do Downfall. We played like our first ever show. So it was like kind of the first time I played like a hardcore type show. And it was all kind of like rappy metal bands that call themselves hardcore from like different parts of North Jersey.
Like Dog Pound, wasn't they a band that were like that?
They might have been a little bit later or just from like enough towns over that you don't even, there was always these little micro scenes in North Jersey for a while.
Yeah.
You might not even hear of all the bands that were around, and they're all like kind of young high school kids and they're short lived. But so these were very like nobody bands, but for like one moment at that time, they were all like seemed like older kids who, they might be the bands you want to keep playing with. So we played the show and it was a music store. It actually might have been in Jefferson, or Sparta or something.
What was the name of it?
Maybe I don't know if it's called the Music Den. It's so long ago, and I played so many shows since then. But I just remember it was outdoors, and eventually the police shut it down, even though they were supposed to have a permit to do this outdoor show. And my band was technically the last band to play. And while one of these kind of like post Rage Against the Machine Biohazard type bands is playing, setting up, they get kicked off.
Wait a minute. Was this during the day?
It had been during the day, and then and it went into night. It was I think it was like October of '94, maybe.
Was it like I think we played this show, my old band, Congress of Cow. Like it was under a pavilion.
I don't think it was under Pavilion, but I remember Congress of Cow from like way back when.
Okay, I just because I remember this outdoor. I don't like. I just remember this. We played that with this other band. These little kids played, and they opened, and they ended up. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot their fucking name. Anyway, I don't know. Like I think that was in like a pack on side music den.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I grew up in Jefferson. That's the only reason like why this
Yeah, it
makes
was
sense to me.
this all of North Jersey, that like Northwest Jersey for me at that age is all kind of one big stew. Sparta, Jefferson, Lake Apacon.
Yeah.
I didn't go there too often, other than for eventually like hall shows and stuff. There'd be some weird VFW hall you go to one time in Lake Apacon to see like a punk band like the Bristols or something. And one of these bands after us, they stole some mics because they were pissed about not getting kicked off. And then I got like beat up by the owner of the venue because he thought I stole the mics. He was like, "Where's the last singer of the singer of the last band?" And this big dude, I'm like, 5'3", 5'4". I'm a little kid, and he like picks me up in a headlock and throws me around, and it was like,
Holy shit.
yeah, it was nuts. I thought it was one of my bandmates like horsing around because we'd heard talk of like, oh, there's mics missing, and they're like pissed off.
Was he a hippie dude named Dave?
I don't remember, to be honest, because
Okay.
it's so long ago, and it was like I went back to that store though when I was like 17 or 18. I don't know what I was looking for, but I remember passing because my dad moved out to Bud Lake. So somehow we're doing something and we pass it. I'm like, oh, this music store, I need something. I don't even know what I needed, but so we went in and it all kind of occurred to me, and I talked to the guy, and he's like, oh, that he remembered, and it was him. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. But like the police were all like on his side when he was there, when this all happened, it was scary, but
Wow.
you
That's
know.
crazy. Okay.
So then Downfall played another show at Boot and Nights, which was I think the first Girl Scout show we did. That show, like me and my friend Cindy, who went to Mars Knowles with like my best friend Punk Rock Dave, me and her kind of booked it. There was this band called Patchwork who had been called Hodgepodge before, and they released a 7-inch, and they were the first local band that I would go see that released a vinyl. So I was just like, oh my God, like there's a punk band in my area. I mean, those dudes were like way older than me, but it was like, holy crap, like someone did this. Like you could put out a vinyl. And I was like, this is awesome. So they were short-lived as Hodgepodge with a record out, and then they turned to Patchwork. So it was them. And then that was like literally the first Boot and Night show. And,
Wow.
but yeah, it was just we had a really good turnout. It was just, I think there was no other shows that night. It was a Friday night. We were becoming kind of scenesters in the hardcore scene. And that was like our first proper show after the outdoor show and like our first hall show. And, everyone we knew, just like all the local skaters, it was just a really great turnout. And that was our last show because then after that, the band kicked me out.
Why?
I think because I wrote all the songs, like I wrote the music, the lyrics, everything, and I just sang in it. And I think there's something about like some little kid when you're like 17 years old getting on your instrument and like telling you what to do. I know they thought I was real bossy, and I know that was a problem. But I had this band vision in my head before I even knew most of these kids. But yeah, so they were like, well, look, you're kind of too young. And I think a big thing was they're like, look, they wanted to still keep playing my songs. So they were like, we think you're the better guitar player. One of the guitar players was leaving anyway because he got a girlfriend and just wanted to like hang out with her. They were like, you're a better guitar player than another guitar player. He's like a grown man compared to you. He was like 6'4". He looked cool. He looked like Stephen Malcolmus. And this is a kid, Matt Gibney, who was the first straight edge kid I ever heard of, who would eventually then die later on from drugs. So they're like, he's cool. He's older. Like he should be the singer. Like you're short and weird and young. They're like, and you're a better guitar player. Like you should be the guitar player. And I was like, I mean, that was like worse than anything other than my parents' divorce, maybe that had happened to me at that point in my life. So I was pretty devastated. But then I already knew the kid I would start Uprise with, the drummer. We were gonna do a band together, but it just took a little minute to come because he was one of the bands that played that very first Boot Night show. He was in a band called Gum Adder, who were kind of like Sebadoh-y, kind of like pop punky indie rock, Was it called Genius? What were they called? Gum Adder? Yeah, they were Gum Adder, and there was a band Genius Boy who played, and that was the kid Scott Shields, who would later go on and do a bunch of bands, and I think one of his bands was later on like one of those Deep Elm emo diaries comps, you know.
Yeah, his name has come up a bunch of times too.
Yeah, I've heard him come up several times. So
I think I started a conversation. Did I start a conversation? No, I haven't. But someone told me I should like reach out to him because he had like a crazy involvement with stuff like later on or made a
yeah,
career out of it. I don't
I
know.
don't know. I don't know if he did, but I'm still in touch with him. I know he always kind of did bands even through the 2000s because I always had friends of friends with him being in North Jersey and stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of then Uprise evolved out of that because then the kid who played drums in Uprise, Steve, he was like, you know, when you do your next band, you should call it Uprise. Because also we knew Downfall couldn't use that name anymore because it was a side project of the singer of Operation Ivy after they broke up and it was on Lookout. So at this point, every single kid has the Operation Ivy CD. It's got the Lookout catalog, saw the name. So they were like, you can't call your band that. And I was like, well, we're X Downfall X. I had more new songs and they were more like Downfall was kind of like just the first hardcore songs I ever wrote. Then I kind of wanted to go in a more specific, like Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits direction. At this point, like hardcore is very much very metal. I started calling it eventually straight edge metal because it was like all these bands are straight edge, but they basically just kind of played a form of metal. And they were either that or they were these really tough guy bands, if you remember that kind of stuff, that like New York hardcore, like that's Place Studio One in Newark, and that wasn't for me either. And I was just like, wow, I really like these bands from the late '80s, and no one does stuff like this, and and I missed it. I wish I could have been there for it. So that was kind of how Uprise started, and
Well, tell me how like the whole band, like how you brought it all together, like with Frank and Mike and all that.
yeah, well, so we started without them. Do you remember a North Jersey punk band called the Impossibles?
Like the didn't they go on to be from Animal Chin?
I don't know. They had another thing they did after that. They were from Chatham, New Jersey, and they existed during this Uprise period, right before Uprise period.
I've heard the Impossibles before, but I think it was because there was this one. I thought they were from Florida. Why do I think
That's
every band?
that's like a more famous band, I think. Eventually,
Yeah, okay, they were Skyish kind of.
yeah, this band was very much kind of like Screeching Weasel's descendants, and they were all just like a year or two older than I was at the time, and so their guitar player, or maybe they hadn't quite formed yet, he became the guitar player of Uprise, and which is funny how I met him is in the pre like internet days. There was these things on the computers called bulletin boards, and you could kind of like the precursor to chat rooms were on there, and basically my older brother met him because he was like the only other teenager at the time who was on these bulletin boards. But they basically him and my brother and this kid basically just talked about stuff that I was into because they had nothing in common. So eventually my brother was like, I have this kid's phone number. He's like a metal kid like you, and he wants to form a band. Like you should talk to him. I'd wanted to do a band with him, and then I was trying to form Uprise. But the Impossibles, like in North Jersey, and our little group of friends, we loved them. They were like, Uprise played a few shows with them, and they were very much like a kind of pop punk band, but they were a lot of fun, and they were
What year was that? What year were they around? Was this 95?
95, 96. They maybe broke up in 97, and
Okay.
they might have changed their name to something else, but it gets.
Again, I'm just looking through like flyers to see. I'm sure they're gonna pop up in one of them. But okay, sorry, go on.
Yeah, they played like Berkeley Heights and New Providence and Chatham, but yeah, so our guitar player was in both those bands, and then he eventually left Uprise to basically be like, hey, look, I'm in the Impossibles. We all live near each other. We're like best friends. This is really fun. Like we just hang out, and then eventually we go to the basement and we play. Uprise, it's like I don't even really know these other guys. It's like I'm not really into like he was straight edge, but he wasn't like really into the scene. He didn't feel like a need to kind of fit into that world. But the first Uprise show happened like, so I'm playing guitar in what was once Downfall, and then we turned our names into Fortitude, and just kind of like mid '90s straight edge, kind of metallic, kind of hardcore, not super metal. I'm getting Uprise together, and I'm booking this show at the Boot and Nights. Me and Cindy, I decide that Uprise is going to get ready in time to play, and I'm going to take Fortitude off the bill, and I'm going to put my new band on as the opener instead. And then that show ended up having this band Hatebreed on it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because I booked this like hardcore band from Connecticut I really liked, and they were having member problems. So, and they were pretty big. They were getting like, they were opening a lot of the big shows I was going to that like 400 kids would be at. They were like a buzzy band, for lack of a better word at the time. They were called Cornerstone. So the singer of Cornerstone calls me up and is like, look, we got to cancel. I really want to play. And then Hatebreed he's like, but can you put my friend's band Hatebreed on? And I knew already who they were because Jamie was like this enormous seamster. And he's like, Jamie will book you. Jamie runs Connecticut. And, Jamie was probably like 16 at the time, but this dude puts on all the shows. So, he'll book you there. And then sure enough, I get a call from Jamie. He promised me 2 Hatebreed shows for this one show.
Wow. Yeah.
And then he calls me back later and was like, hey, can I add another band to the bill? Our show like during the time period that the shows we're doing are actually turning into a tour. And then he asked if this other band could play. And I was like, dude, you're on this show by like a thread. And then it turns out it was this band Ignite. And I was crazy about them. And they just had like a 7-inch or 2 out or something. And they were, do you ever hear of Ignite?
Oh yeah, I saw them play with Weston at the Wetlands.
Yeah.
It's like the video that's on, I think, Cinema Beer Goggles or Beer Nuts. It's the video of Ignite playing was that Wetland show.
So this is Ignite's like second ever show in New Jersey, and I was obsessed with them. So I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess they can play, but meanwhile, I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna play with Ignite. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, technically, I think it would have been like their first. No, I think they played Chatham the week before, 2 weeks before, but they were like everybody's new favorite band, and like the older dudes in the scene. They were very much kind of like a late '80s kind of hardcore band, but more melodic. And all the dudes, or several of the dudes, had been in some cool like late '80s straight edge bands from Southern California. So they were, it was a prize to have them on the show. And then so Uprise got to open for them in Hatebreed at our very first show, and it was at Boot Nights.
Jesus.
But it's funny because we're going to a show in New Brunswick like 2 weeks before the show, and me and the drummer of Fortitude are getting to the show, and I was kind of a little shit. I did not like being kicked out of my own band or being demoted to being guitar player and all this stuff. I replaced Fortitude on the flyers, and we're stopping to get gas and use the bathroom or something like halfway to New Brunswick, which is like, we're over a half hour from my house. He's like, oh, while we're here, we should make flyers. I was like, oh, that's a good point. Let me run off a handful of flyers to hand out this New Brunswick show. And he's like, oh, this is a really cool flyer. And he's looking at it and he's like, hey, wait a minute. And first he's like, oh, cool, your new band's going to play too, Uprise. And then he's like, wait a minute, you've replaced us on the bill. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And he's like, what the fuck, Matt? What the fuck? And I was like, well, dude, you guys kicked me out of my own band, and now I got a new band. And he's like, no, this was our show. I was like, well, I put on the show, and I was and I was in a band, and I wanted my band to play because, we don't get offered as many shows as I'd like, and I'm putting on shows, so I put us on as opening band. Now that I'm in this other band, and kind of fuck you guys, we're gonna play. And he's like, if you don't put our name on the flyer right now, I am leaving you here at this rest stop. I mean, this dude's 4 years older than me. He wasn't that intimidating, but he was bigger, and he was a little crazy, and he had that like crazy strength, I literally get a marker from someone at the counter, or pick a marker out of my bag. I write his band name, Fortitude, on a piece of paper, rip it up, and put it on the flyer, and Fortitude's back on the bill.
Oh no shit.
Yeah, and then it becomes like a 7 or 8 band bill, and
I gotta see if I can find this flyer.
John Cheese might have given it to me. He texted me a bunch of flyers the other day, and
good old John Cheese.
He's like, he saved everything.
I did find the Impossibles on a flyer.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to sneak that in there in case people were like remembering that. Just really quickly, it was, and I'll talk about this I'll talk about John Cheese again. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the show was, I see them, they were played with Plow United, Walter Krug, The Impossibles, Atomic Chickens, Friday, July 5th, the American Legion Hall in New Providence, New Jersey. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's them. And and what was cool with The Impossibles is like, I just remember Uprise, we made a demo, and we played one show with it out. And then it just circulated with our friends, and we just didn't have like an easy time getting shows. We were a pretty new band. I'm way young. It's not like we were like the cool new straight edge band, and we're playing like faster hardcore. I'll remember somebody, I'm not going to say who, but they ended up becoming a singer of a really famous kind of like hardcore pop punky band. And I remember after like our third show, he was outside of it. And he was like talking about our band. He was like, "Oh, Uprise, they're," and he makes the motion of like playing really fast drums and rolls his eyes and is like, yeah, one of those kind of bands. And he was in like a really like metal straight edge band at the time. And then just like 2 or 3 years later, he'd be in like a very fast, like melodic-y Gorilla Biscuits sounding band that would become very popular and tour all the time. So
So, all right, I've never done this before. I think it'd be hilarious. If anyone can guess who this is, email thiswasthescene@gmail.com, and if you guess right, I'll send you a T-shirt.
I'm
Well,
sure.
the first part. I'll have Matt tell me after the interview.
But yeah, now as I say all this, it's also like I just don't think we were very good. I mean, we were all pretty young,
Well, I mean, like, what number show is this?
like 3 or 4.
Well, yeah.
So then what happens is, so our demo's out, and then I'll go through all of our friends and all this. One day, and like now our guitar player might have left us to just do the Impossibles, but one day we're in Berkeley Heights, where I'm at this Impossible show. Maybe the power goes out or something, and they're just like, "What are we gonna do?" Maybe the PA goes out. So all of a sudden, the guitar player of our band starts playing the opening riff to "The Blind," which was the first song on our demo tape, and then eventually the first song on our 7-inch. And out of nowhere, all these kids start singing along and start singing all the words to Blind, and all the kids in Impossibles are singing it. And I remember that being like a really touching moment because I was like, holy shit, I didn't even know everyone had our demo yet.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then I remember after the first show with our demo out, I'm in a show in like near Trenton, and this kid, Brian, comes up to me. I only met at like one show, and he's like, "You're an Uprise, right?" And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I just got your demo. He's like, you guys are my new favorite band, or one of my new favorite bands. And he thought it was really cool that there was other young kids doing a straight edge band. And that dude ended up becoming the drummer of Saves the Day a few years.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So,
That's amazing.
it was a slow build, but it was really, there just wasn't like another young kid straight edge band at the time. So even before we got that good, a lot of people liked us because we were the only one of us. And that's kind of how I think we met Mike Z. I forget exactly how we met him. I think we met him really because there was like these like Morris County Youth Crew kids who were like skaters who were kind of like a little bit less, really not like John Cheese and his friends and stuff. They were a little bit older, and we called them the Morris County Adult Crew.
Wait, someone talked about that.
Yeah,
And then it was John Cheese.
John
Yeah,
Cheese
Cheese
did
said
talk
that.
about his interview. I remember when I listened to it, I cracked up because I didn't even think they would remember us calling them that. But that was like my sense of humor. But and it was less about them being older, which they were. I think it was really had to do with their like nuanced and mature view of like the scene and hardcore, where I was very like, you do or die, and you either go to all the shows that ever happened that you can get to, or you listen to these kind of bands. And then I think they were like, no, this is fun. Like, we like all kinds of bands, and we go to shows, but we have a balanced life.
Well, a couple of things there. Okay, one, was it Brian Malloy's interview? He talked about that. I could swear he said. Do you listen to his?
I did listen to his, but
I,
I
I
I
thought he
don't
might have said that
remember.
too, or he was in the actual like the adult youth crew, or the Morris County adult crew,
I, I
something like that.
I
I'll have
don't
to
think
check
we
it
would
out.
have called him part of that because it was really this group. Basically, I literally started what would be called the Morris County Youth Crew, gave it its name. And John Cheese's best friend, Brian Sheffield, who would eventually become the label manager of Doghouse Records and stuff, and
Oh wow.
he took a lot of pictures and a lot of big emo and hardcore bands records. His younger brother was kind of like my right-hand man, this kid Rob Sheffield, and we called him Robbie Rob in the MCYC. The Morris County Adult Crew was really like a group of like 5 or 6, 7 kids that were his older brother's friends who were like, they just went to a tiny bit less amount of shows than we did, and were like a little less dogmatic about these things like straight edge and shows and what bands you listened to and what bands you thought were not, worthy of your time and all that. Brian came to us through me. But he wasn't really part of what we called the Morris County Adult Crew, but he was, and probably too mature and older to want to be affiliated with like the Morris County Youth Crew as it was known. But
I remember having kind of a, I don't know how I would say this. There was always someone that was a couple years older that was really good at giving a better perspective. And for you guys, it was the Morris County Adult Crew. For me, it was Josh Walhemus from Right Turn Eddie, because we'd have conversations and we would talk, like selling out was the big
oh
conversation,
yeah,
right? Like me as a fucking 17-year-old kid living at home with no bills or rent is like talking about how people making money off their music is bullshit. Like, fuck me. I remember talking to him about that. So I would bring up stupid crap like that, and he'd be like, "Well, let's just sit back for a second." And I'd be like, "No, man, like you're wrong." And I was just just full of fire and aggression and had like no context of what the hell I was talking about. But there was just that person that was like, "Okay, well, think of it like this," and you just
Yeah.
didn't want to. And then later on in life, you're like, "God damn it, they were so correct in their thinking,
Oh yeah.
so wise."
Yeah, I look back honestly with like the specifically the Uprise era with a lot of regrets because in terms of not related to punk and hardcore, my music tastes were really broad. But because of that, I got picked on like crazy. Like everyone thought I was gay because I liked all sorts of like weird female artists like Tori Amos, and the list just goes on. I liked stuff like the Smiths and New Order well before that kind of became cool again. And this is the whole time I'm into hardcore pretty much. But because I liked all this other weird kind of music that wasn't hardcore, I didn't really like a lot of emo-y stuff. And it's not that I just didn't like it. I then became very like against it or something. And I had a lot of opinionated opinions. I didn't really have a nuanced view of things. And, I definitely regret that. I wish, even though if I wasn't going to maybe become favorite bands with these artists, I wish I had a more open-minded view of the world and things. Because I think straight edge made me lose some of my open-mindedness in a way because I just became such a narrow view of like straight edge against the world.
I think there's something that's like okay with that at the time. I mean, granted, it's going to alienate you with some people, but I think it's if you're so focused on one thing, it's good. But then if you stay like that, because it probably kept you out of a lot of trouble in certain ways. But I think if you go too hard on one side of the spectrum, eventually it's going to correct itself.
Yeah, that's true. But I still got into an insane amount of trouble. So I think, not drinking. Sure, I didn't get into drinking trouble, but I got into like every other trouble known to man. So it was sort of like for a teenager, really. It wasn't like it totally helped my life.
Huh. Well, we talk about that though. That's interesting because I mean that's like that was the thing that was being pushed on people was like the straight like I said like the CrossFit reference before is that when people start it they just can't shut the fuck up about it. Like I know because I did it like 10 years ago I started it and I was like so into it because it just exciting that you're in some I don't know what it is. It's like it because it's maybe just such a small box of an ideal that you're in and other people gravitate towards it so you have something to talk about all the time but then you try to express that to other people who don't get it and that don't want to hear it but you're forcing it on them and they're like shut the fuck up like I don't care about that
Yeah.
but and then but the thing with straight edge I remember back then is that like Mike was he was straight edge and when we heard about that we were like 16 15 16 and like I couldn't even buy I wasn't even drinking as it was or like and some people were like smoking weed and shit like that but I thought like it was very aggressive where I remember there were stories about Earth Crisis beating the shit out of people at crowds because they were drinking or something like that. Have you ever heard of these like rumors that went around?
There was always be rumors of stuff like that. I mean, we look like we were very anti-Earth Crisis. We thought their militancy was straight edge. Like, for a few months I was into it when I was in middle school because I was like, oh my God, I'm so angry. I'm so straight edge. This is awesome. And then you get just even a few months older and I'm like, this is stupid, you know? And then I thought it made all the else's straight edge look bad. And even though those things were just rumors, there would be all these kinds of rumors. But I hate to say it. I mean, I think that's part of what made Earth Crisis a very popular band. On top of the music, I think they had this mythos about them. And even though so much of it wasn't true, the fact that it could be and it was believable, just that the word of mouth, that controversy around them just kept generating people talking about them, which therefore got people to their music. And then all of a sudden straight edge this thing, and it means something very different to me than it means to Earth Crisis. And then Earth Crisis is this enormous band, and then it makes me feel like even an outsider in the greater world of what people think of as straight edge.
Yeah, I mean there was something that popped up when I said that. I think that the joke I was gonna make was like kind of like how I was with ska. When I first heard it, I was so into it, and like a couple months later, I was like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm fucking over the. Granted, it was more fun and happy and things like that.
yeah, and I think that's what happens when you're a teenager, right? You just like you can get really passionately into something for like a minute, and then all of a sudden, just one day, it's like the fog clears, and you're like, "What was I thinking? This kind of sucks."
Yeah, I mean that's just the part of growing up is you're just gonna gravitate really hard to one side of something and then be like, Oh, okay. Like I'm actually learning to make better. I'm trying to decide like the decisions that like match the ideals that I'm developing right now.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, for me, straight edge, because I was going to do a band, because I'd been in bands since I was 10. I played my first show at 12. It was like when I got into straight edge, I wasn't going to just be straight edge. I was going to be in a straight edge band. And then in my mind, I wanted to be eventually in a leading straight edge band. I wanted to be in a band that, had a larger audience and did to me what Youth of Today did for me, or did for others what Youth of Today did to me. And that was like the hope, but I'm still way too young probably to have the confidence and the lyrical acumen to get this message across in like a nuanced and smart enough way to reach people. But
Yeah, or people were like, I don't really want to need a kid telling me about my life at that young age. But you're like, but it matters. This is like you need to listen to this.
well, ultimately you'll just you're going to be just more speaking to other kids. So I think Uprise's
That's true.
popularity kind of started when first Mike C joined, because then he was a legit hardcore kid who looked the part. And unlike our guy from the Impossibles, who was an amazing dude, fantastic guitar player, and I loved him to death, he liked hardcore as one of many kinds of music in general. And he didn't have the same passion for it. And he was really kind of probably just being an Uprise as a favor to me because, I got kicked out of my band and we had wanted to do a band together. But so we get Mike Z. He's not much of a guitar player. I'm probably oodles better than him, but like, he's one of us. He's like, we had just kind of formed what would we call the Morris County Youth Crew at this point, when I kind of realized we had like these like dozen, 15 kids who all went to shows and we don't live in the same town. Well, I realized pretty much everyone lived in Morris County or just right outside. And so I called us the Morris County Youth Crew, and then it just kind of grew from there.
What was that like? Because I know the NJPP thing came about. I think I can't have this conversation's happened so many times, but I think it was Gabe who jokingly drew it on his hand, or Ricky, and I think it was a mock at either was a Morris County Youth Crew or just in general where everyone was writing all that shit around NX,
Of course,
and I think
yeah.
that was a total stab at it. But but you guys like when you created this, because I remember there was a couple kids up in Green Pond that were part of this whole thing.
Exactly. That's my best friend Dave. He was a spiky hair punk kid, but
Who's the redheaded kid? This is so
Rob
it's
Rob Sens, the skater kid.
there was a skater kid who had like red hair. He was like really fucking annoying at that time because he was young. Oh God, he was friends with like Pat Hanwright.
Hmm.
I don't know, man. This is like such random details if you don't know the answer. I'm sure he's a very nice person, but at the
Yeah.
time, he was not. He was just kind of like, okay. He was kind of like a smart ass. That was really the term I was going after.
Gotcha, gotcha. There was a kid, Rob Sheffield, who did live
Okay,
in Green Palm, but he was from Rockaway. But he had more blonde hair than a redhead. But he
okay.
he was a smartass. He made a lot of enemies, and he was sort of my, as I said, like he was the kid who was sort of my right hand man in like forming the Morris County Youth Crew. Because I'd already had this vision in my mind of calling it this, but I was a little embarrassed about it or something, or felt a little some kind of way. And then he was the one who was kind of like we were talking, and he's like, do you ever notice how like there's just so many of us and we live in this kind of just one little area per se, and like there's this movement happening, like there's this real thing. And I was like, yeah, Morris County Youth Crew. And then we made up, and then it was crazy because then these other kids came up and they were from like Berkeley Heights and stuff, and they were friends of the Impossibles, and they were like just like a year younger than me or so, and they show up one day and they were like in art class they made Morris County Youth Crew t-shirts because they were just like, we think this is awesome.
That's awesome.
And I had no idea. So then we're like, hey, can you take some of our sweatshirts and screen them on there? And I had a like a flight jacket, like one of those like military bomber jackets. And I had that, and I had Mars Cannon, and I brought it to them, and then they stenciled it on the back and screen printed, and we had it was a little moment. And it's funny, I don't think it was your podcast, but some interview with what was his name, Chris Gefford.
Yeah.
My last band was like label mates with him on Don Giovanni, but I was hearing an interview he did for something. Maybe it was Turn Out a Punk. And he talked about his very first show, and he's like, oh man, there was these gnarly group of like hardcore people there, and they were called I think he called us the Bergen County Youth Crew.
Wait, I think that was my interview with Chris.
Was
That was about the Some Kid interview.
I don't know. I just remember reading this, hearing this interview because someone was like,
Oh no, he was at Turn Out a Punk. Yeah, he was on that. Okay.
I think it was that one because once it happened, everyone was like texting me and messaging me, being like, "Yo, you got to listen to this." Like he talks about the Morris County Youth Crew, and I remembered I was at that show. It was kind of a mix of pop punk bands. It was just like the regular like mid '90s like North Jersey hall show without a headliner, just like a mix of a bunch of bands. And if there wasn't any other show going on, there would be a lot of kids there just to go for something to do, you know. And so he was there, and I remember he talked about the MCYC being like intimidating, and I was like so bummed because we were all like none of us fought. I don't know. I wanted to be very inclusive or very you wanted to be like the opposite of these older tough guy bands that played what I called kickbox metal, that were just intimidating, which is even why Uprise played like fast hardcore, because I felt like fast hardcore, just compared to how violent the heavy and slow bands were, to me, it just felt like running around and being silly. It felt more like being a little more free. It felt less aggressive.
But I remember I told this story in another episode. I remember the first time I saw you guys because we knew that Mike was in your band because of the 7 inch, which I want to talk about in a second. But I remember I had never seen a hardcore show. So we play. It was I think it was Congress of Cow. We played a show in Boonton, and I'm gonna mix all these shows up. But we had played. We were there, and you guys came in at the very end, and you guys set up and started playing. And I think either you were supposed to play or you got on at the last minute and they put you at the end of the show. Once you guys broke into it, like 40 kids just all in the breakdown started doing floor punches, and I had never seen it, and I started laughing my ass because it was like the coolest thing, but it was so different that I was just laughing because I was like, I've never seen that many guys in unison do this. And I don't even know how long you guys were a fucking band, but the fact that you had that many fucking people that into you, like that was pretty awesome. I was like,
Yeah.
these guys have controlled this fucking room right now, and and I'm so confused, but I'm very intrigued of what the fuck this is.
I mean, I think that's just kind of the reaction, though, that like every hardcore band, that people start knowing their stuff. I think that's not like exclusive to us by any stretch of the imagination. I think we were just
But it was this thing that, but it was even if it wasn't directly towards you, like you guys were in this like bubble together,
yeah,
this
absolutely.
hardcore thing that I didn't know, and I was like, that's wild. It's like if you go to a ska show, you might not know the band, but everyone just starts skanking because they're like, we're part of this movement together.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Well,
okay.
and you got to understand too, at this time in hardcore shows, you couldn't go to a hardcore show without everyone who moshes, no matter what the band sounded like. If people were like doing a mosh pit thing, they were doing this mega violent, like swinging their arms in windmills. They were doing these karate kicks, and that's what moshing was. And I was basically at a point where I fall in love with this stuff. I feel like I was sold an ill bill of sales or something. I forget what it's called, but like, I felt like I was sold a false deed to this punk hardcore thing. I just couldn't believe it. I go to all these shows and this is not what I expected or wanted it to be. And it was just really, really kind of grossly macho. And the moshing was insane. So even though maybe from an outsider, even that stuff seems kind of aggressive or kind of something, compared to what was going on, that was like very, you couldn't just be at your first show, and I don't feel like you would have gotten pushed around or smushed the same way, because it's still moshing for sure, but like I feel like it was so much less violent, and I felt like I literally, during the kind of climate change within hardcore in this era, it took a handful of years, but all of a sudden after a bunch of years, you could actually go see a popular band play, and there wouldn't actually be kickboxing. Kids would be doing stuff like floor punching and skanking around, and it was a much less violent thing. And I kind of hope that we had some impacts, because that was like a mission statement of mine. I just felt like it was alienating as fuck to me. And I remember anytime I got a girl that I was friends with into it, or I met a girl who went to some shows, that was the first thing everyone would say. Like, these shows are so violent, or it's so macho. Meanwhile, then again, this would still end up having its own kind of macho boys club ways that I was just absolutely oblivious to. But I felt at least if we could do one thing and make shows a little less violent, for lack of a.
Well, yeah, there was like a tribalness to it, but it was kind of being violent in your own space. Because like if you're full of punching or you're doing spin kicks and stuff, you're not trying to do it to connect with somebody, like physically connect to their face. Like you're doing it as kind of like a movement, but you're releasing something, but not releasing it onto somebody,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Depending on how you're doing it.
Yeah. What do you think about now when you see when you see bands get back together like Gorilla Biscuits used to today, Shelter,
Hmm.
fucking Judge, like all these bands are getting together. If you can go on Hate 56, I think is this guy's name.
Yeah, yeah.
If you watch those shows, I mean, it's these guys are still like just. Do you see that as the thing you wanted to become, or do you still think it's like the thing you didn't like crowds, like the way they act now?
I think now it's more nuanced because I think by literally I think eventually enough people kind of got sick of things being so as violent as they are, but I've definitely seen hardcore shows for some pretty heavy bands in the last like 5 or 10 years, or I've been at some, and I would literally be shocked at how comparatively not violent or not just not outwardly kind of gross people were dancing. I had to say I felt kind of like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
It's not what it was like in the mid 90s when like tough guy hardcore was like at like its peak in North Jersey, and I was like wanted nothing to do with it.
So talk about the 7 inch, because that was like I said, that was a lot of these questions or these interviews are these questions I've had or moments that I remember from being 17, and it's so funny that I get them answered now or I get to talk about it. And to anyone else, it might not be a big thing, but for me, it's like, fuck it, it's my podcast. I want to know this shit. So Mike Z rolls into lunch at Jefferson Township High School. He comes in. We're like, "Hey, you're in a band now." He's like, "Yeah, I'm playing guitar with this band called Uprise, a hardcore band." We're like, "That's fucking cool." And he pulls out the 7 inch and he pulls out Silent No Longer. And did he record on that record?
Oh yeah, he was in the band for just a little bit, just maybe 2 or 3 months, not very long, maybe a little bit longer. But I remember it was like because he lived in the outskirts and stuff, so we was like,
Yeah, we were in the boonies, man.
so it was like, Mike, as soon as you get a car or turn 17 and you can borrow like a family member's car, you're in the band. Because actually, what's really funny in the interim, so Jack leaves, and then Steve, our drummer, is friends with this guy, Ben Wyman, who's in a band called Arcane at the time, and eventually would be starting a band called Dillinger Escape Plan, who would be fucking ginormous.
Holy shit.
But Ben from Dillinger Escape Plan, because he lives like 3 minute car ride from my house, um, Ben plays guitar for us in the interim to play like a handful of shows.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
ridiculous.
yeah, and then the very first show, Mike was very, very new at guitar. I think he played bass a little bit. So again, it was like he bought like some $100 guitar, some Epiphone at like, some music store, and then got a car, and then he joins Uprise. The bar for musicianship wasn't so high, I guess. But I remember the very first Mike Z show, we still had Ben in the band because we were nervous about how we would sound, because Ben was just like this metal shredder. He was fantastic. And
Yeah.
but I remember, and this is what happens when you're little. Like, I'm this kid, and Ben's like driving me to a practice, and I was like, I was asking him. I remember we're listening to The Cure, and I was really psyched because I loved like a lot of non-hardcore music, and I just remember being nervous that he's going to play some terrible music that I didn't like, and make me annoyed. And so I'm like just like this, still like this kid compared to him. And I remember asking him about being straight edge and stuff because I didn't really know how long he was going to play with us, and I really wanted to not stop playing shows. And he was like, yeah, I'm basically, I don't do anything, but I don't really consider myself straight edge. And I remember basically kind of asking him if he'd X up when he played with us, which now is like so embarrassing, just sort of like, can you put X's on your hands to play with us? It's like this little kid, and like the shows he played with us were like, I think he maybe one time we got to open for a cool band, but like, they were just entry level hall shows. We played a show at my house actually, because my mom went on vacation for a week with a boyfriend, and then my older sister was supposed to be watching me, and then she was just staying at her boyfriend's house all the time. I literally had the first we had the MCYC. Oh, it was Mike Z's birthday party. It was Mike Z's birthday party, and it must have been his 17th birthday party because then he joined Uprise right after that.
Oh.
We had a MCYC sleepover party. The drummer of Uprise made an MCYC zine, and And yeah, fucking would actually had this MCYC slang dictionary on it because we'd already had so much slang from us all hanging out together that there was a glossary on the back of all the terms we were using at the time.
Oh, that's funny.
And then yeah, it was Mike Z sleepover, and we had like a few bands play at my mom's house. Then the cops shut it down right before Uprise played. And I remember it was still probably only like the second or third show of Uprise, like after our demo was out. So that was actually really cool because then everyone was singing along, which is like the thing in hardcore bands. So it was like a dream come true for me to like
Oh yeah.
have everyone. And I remember someone bootlegged the video, bootlegged it. Someone filmed the show because we had a place so quiet because of the cops. And I live in this tiny house on this like just really small little suburban street. We played really quiet. So when you're in the video, everyone singing along is actually louder than the band, and it's pretty funny.
That's fucking great.
And
Wait, real quick, hold
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Did Ben X up?
he certainly did not X up. And
Wait, what was his response?
I think he just kind of was like, I think he probably, tried to just kind of say like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to like basically what might be conforming. I don't even remember what he said, but I remember feeling really stupid even for asking at the time. And after I said it, but I really wanted to have the image of a straight edge, but I think that was really important to me because it was more than just the message. Like I wanted other people to kind of believe in this. And, at this point, I don't know if he's like 19 years old or something. And I just don't think he had time for any of that. And, you just get a little bit older, you're less dogmatic and less like feel like you need to fit in. I think there was absolutely no peer pressure felt from him that he needed to fit in with this band of kids, but it was awesome that he did it. And he played on our second demo. I think I don't know if Mike Z and him are both on our second demo, but he definitely is on our second demo.
That's the Positive Youth on the Rise?
Yes, that's it. I don't even have one. And then, yeah, we did the 7-inch. So then basically after the second demo comes out, it's a little bit better than our first one, but it's still recorded on a 4-track. Like, whatever reason, we don't, pony up the like $200 to go into some small studio for 5 hours and record a proper demo. And we just spend $75 recording on our friend's 4-track for the afternoon. But
oh, shit.
But that demo was a bit better than the first. So then and this is when like the Mars County Youth Crew thing's starting to happen. And there's more 15, 16-year-old kids getting into this kind of stuff. And that's when we start opening more shows that are cool that I didn't personally put on, and then Mike Z joins and it becomes more of a thing now because we all like kind of have the shaved head, hooded sweatshirt, army pants, skate shoes, kind of youth crew look and stuff. And
well, didn't he join? I thought Frank Cappuccio, because he was in your guys' band.
Yes.
He was like a connection between Mike and you guys, or did Mike get him in the band?
Mike got him in the band. So
because he was he was from Jefferson too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he came to I remember going to some show in do you remember this like little Frank remembers it obviously, but there was this little like church or something that turned into a house. And this girl put on like a few kind of pop punk and hardcore shows there, like really local bands. But I remember coming there right after we made the Uprise demo. And I remember Frank coming with Mike Z, and that was the first time I met him. And I think he bought an Uprise demo, and then we became fast friends. And Frank literally joined like the day after we recorded the record. So we recorded the 7-inch. Frank joins like literally like the next day or so.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
And then he's a really good guitar player, so that was like really exciting. And he wrote music too, so then it wasn't just like me writing everything, which obviously I love doing, but it's great when someone's really good and has more good ideas to put into the mix. So that was really cool.
Dude, he is a fucking beast right now. I'm on his Facebook page. Holy shit.
He's so big.
Oh my god, he's fucking gigantic.
Well, he's been big since like the late 90s. He so after Uprise, so Frank becomes my best friend. He joins Uprise. He becomes one of my best friends rather. He joins Uprise, and then like a year after he joins, before we really record again, after the 7-inch, he leaves the band, and then a few months later, me and him start a new band called Dead Nation with my best friend Dave Ackerman, Punk Rock Dave as we called him. And Frank's already kind of jaded from the Uprise experience because we did a lot of little things. We didn't grow maybe the way I envisioned us to eventually grow, but I think he was just kind of like, okay, been there, done that. So now he's in a new band. It's got to play these small shows again or whatever. And he would be a little dodgy because we would want to play like every show ever, and he would just cancel last minute or he not show up. And so now we're recording our first Dead Nation's first album, and it all happened really quick. We just did a 7-inch a few months into being a band, made another one. So Frank just stopped showing up to our band practices. And he doesn't even show up to the first day of recording. We go to like a nice studio for us at the time. We spent like way much more money than like a bunch of teenagers should be spending on a punk album that's not like fronted by like a label, And he shows up to the studio and he basically looks like a fat kid. We were making jokes that he had to walk in the door sideways. But he just basically disappeared for a few months, and he came back. And this dude, my mom called him Skinny Frank, and my mom literally asked the first time he slept over if he had cancer, because he was so skinny. He's like, is he okay? And to go from that skinny to like just big, so big. Like I remember like at this point where like the youth crew straight edge bands we liked from like 2 years ago are kind of passé to us, And he comes in wearing this really big Floor Punch t-shirt. And it was like, why is he wearing a Floor Punch shirt? And then some point across the session, I realized, I'm like, I think this is like the only thing he can fit into is this baggy like XL Floor Punch shirt from when he was 16.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, and he's been jacked ever since, and he's still one of my best friends. I love him like a brother.
So you guys like you shamed him, and that was how he just changed his life. He's like, in that day forward, I
No,
just stopped eating carbs.
no, not even. I think it was something he started coming to on his own. I forget why, but I remember him weightlifting like almost a year before, because I remember he kind of stopped being vegetarian at some point because he was weightlifting. But you didn't really see a huge difference, but you could see he was getting a little toned, and you're like, oh, that's cool. As Dead Nation got more serious, he literally just kind of disappeared and got jacked, and then came into the studio one day, a few days into us making a record, and there he is, and he's a beast, and he's been a beast ever since.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, there's the vinyl record. So I mentioned to you when we were messaging each other that I was like, wasn't it red? And you said no, it was pink. So what was the story behind that?
So basically, the longer version of the story is that, I really wanted to have red ink on the cover of the record. There was a lot of we were getting offers to do 7 inches from some small labels after probably our second demo, and once we start playing more shows, and a lot of people, if you remember the mid to late 90s, there's a lot of records coming out with like photocopied covers, and all this. And I was very, very dogmatic. Like, this has to be offset printed. I want a 2-color cover, like Diva demands, for a teenager in a 2-bit band. But I really wanted red and white ink cover. And then I wanted colored vinyl. And I got the idea that I was like, I want red and white swirled so it matches the red and white cover. Now we get it done at, maybe United Record Pressing, and a place that doesn't do the fancy swirled colors that you see, and you can buy them now, like records that are swirled. So we asked for red and white swirled, and they said yes. And I knew that was expensive because I looked into all these things. The records come back, and basically there was a band Ensign and this band Strength 691, and some of their friends and some of the guys in the bands got together to start this label, and they did an H2O 7-inch, and they, an Ensign Good Riddance split, and then they did our record. And so the guy who kind of fronted all the money calls me up. He's like, yo, Matt, the records are back. And I'm like, hallelujah. He's like, it's great. They sound awesome. There's just one problem. I was like, uh-oh. He's like, there's 2 problems. One problem was, he's like, you said you wanted red and white mix, like red and white swirl? He's like, yeah, well, do you know what happens when you mix red and white? And I was like, I guess it comes like a lighter red, huh? He's like, yeah, it comes pink. So he's like, you now have pink vinyl. So he's like, it's a little weird. And I was like, you know what? That's fine. So we called it straight edge red. That was our joke. And then the other problem was the B-side label had a picture of Uprise, the band, and our Mars County Youth Crew friends on the back of it. And he's like, well, where the record, where the needle comes out, not the needle, the metal thing in the middle that comes into the hole. He's like, that cut off somebody's face. And we're like, oh, no big deal. But then it was our bass player, Greg. So he's like, it wasn't just one of the kids in your crew. It was like one of the band members. But then we thought that was hilarious because Greg kind of could be like a little shit to us sometimes, Like, there was always a little like Greg and me, like Greg. So we all cracked up because we're like, no, that's perfect. Better to.
I thought you were gonna say like, well, you know where that comes through? Well, it happened to just be where right in someone's crotch area.
That
So
right,
someone
yeah.
just has like a metal dick when the record's playing the whole time.
If we were like, yeah, if we were only clever enough to have done that.
Who drew the artwork?
This kid Todd, he had a band called Full Fledged, who were kind of like this sort of skinhead straight edge band from Bergen County, but they were like Morris County Youth Crew kind of affiliates. And yeah, he drew it. And sadly, the records, that was another problem too. I think the covers came back before the records, and the covers were pixelated, and it looked kind of bad. But ultimately, we just kind of kept it, and we couldn't really. There was not enough money around to like reprint these nice like glossy 2-color covers. So
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on Discogs, and I think from as a graphic designer, I'm pretty sure that what the way he drew it is that the art people had to scale it up, which makes it pixelated. Just from a graphic design standpoint, that's what causes that shit.
and yeah, I think most importantly, you got to remember this is like 1997, like home Photoshop, not
Oh yeah.
like literally just to save money. It's a small little label, so like a dude from Ensign literally like does the graphic design layout like, and then drops it off at the printer at 9 a.m. when they open before Ensign goes on tour with like Sick of It All or Good Riddance or something, and then
Yep.
that kind of thing. But yeah, so those guys put out our 7-inch, and that was pretty cool because they
That's crazy.
yeah.
Orphaned Records.
Yeah, they didn't, and that what really helped us is they did an H2O 7-inch right before ours, and that had that they made like 6 or 7 thousand of those or something, and then every one of those has an ad of like coming soon, like straight edge hardcore from the Morris County Youth Crew, and we didn't even have the artwork ready, and we just kind of had them. We picked this picture of like skinheads or something, or like gnarly looking hardcore dudes from like a Gnostic Front flyer from like the early '80s or the late '80s or something, and then we're like, just use this for now. And they put that in the ad. But I remember, the record came out and they'd already had like stacks and stacks of mail orders for it when no one had even heard us. So that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's got like the releases. They had Strength 691, an H2O 7-inch, Nothing Left, Uprise, and then a Good Riddance Ensign split.
Yeah, and then they didn't do anything again. But
Yeah, that was it. The Good Riddance split with Ensign was the last one.
yeah. And that might have even come out before our record, to be honest, because I know our record was pretty delayed. Like we recorded it without a label because I was just like, if we're gonna spend money in the studio, we might as well just go and do a 7-inch, and then just if it's good, someone will put it out. And then people wanted to put it out, but then as I said, I had like these diva demands. I was like, I don't want a photocopied cover. I wanted a poster in the insert, and we actually got one, and that was really cool. So it was kind of the record I'd wanted to make, and it was definitely insane being in high school and like having a record out and a record that you think looks really cool. And that was
it was so dope. I mean, like even the way you thought of just like, wow, this is so cool. Like we look awesome. I was like, yeah, it did, because I just thought Mike was like the coolest person when that happened. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. This is like fucking that. And also, and I mentioned it before to somebody, but those are the little things that happen around me where I realized that I could do that shit myself as a band. So like watching people that were my age do it just made me believe that we could do the same thing.
absolutely.
And that was the coolest thing about that time, is that it's like a band would record a demo tape and they'd be like, oh my God, you have a demo tape. And then they do a 7-inch, and then they do a CD, and you're like, oh my God, you have a CD. Then they get a van, and then they have this nice equipment, and then they go on tour, and then they get a label. It's like you just watch them do all these things, and it kind of just slowly plows the path for you where you're like, oh my God, like we can literally do these things. And that was pretty much the first. I think when I saw that, I was like, I want to have I want to have a 7-inch so bad now. And like years later, we finally had one. But that was like I need to do this now after looking at that thing.
That's so awesome, man. It's always
Yeah.
great to hear. And yeah, even though we'd kind of, by the time the 7-inch came out, we kind of did less of the local shows and the kind of pop punk shows. But I definitely remember a little bit later, after the 7-inch came out, like a lot of, at this point, like, in my high school, I didn't know anybody. I'd gone to Catholic school my whole life. I transferred from a Catholic high school, Seton Hall Prep. Some point after the Uprise 7-inch came out, these kids I never met would come up to me and be like, hey, like, do you know about like straight edge bands. Like, do you know of a band called Uprise? I'm like, that's my band. And they'd be like, okay, like Gabe from Humble Beginnings told us about your band and that if, we wanted to hear a good straight edge band, like we should check you out. So that was really cool. That there was still like, yeah, Gabe actually, when they started getting popular, Gabe asked Uprise to do a split 7 with Humble Beginnings because he said that we were like his favorite like local hardcore band, and he thought they were going to really blow up. And he's like, he wanted to help us out. By that point, we were just like kind of falling apart. The MCYC kids were all like going to like college and at different schools. My infatuation with straight edge, the way I had known it, was changing and stuff. When Humble Beginnings, even right before Midtown started, and they started getting real popular, I was definitely like, oh fuck, maybe we should have done that. That might have been a cool thing to do, but
That would have been pretty cool, just like like having a pop punk band and a hardcore. Well, I mean, I guess like there was a mixture of that. Like Weston was kind of one of those bands that bridged that gap with hardcore and pop punk.
yeah, I mean, Weston, like I figured they would get talked about at some point, but like I'm telling you, like 13 to 14, I must have seen Weston like 12 times. Like I just didn't even have to try to ever see them. I would just go to a hall show. You just put a dart onto the map of North Jersey, and you ran and you go to a hall show somewhere, like a Pac Hong, Berkeley Heights, somewhere, I don't know, anywhere. And I saw them so much. Like,
Yeah.
now I'm probably naming the only towns they didn't play, but like, they weren't a hardcore band, but yeah, they just played like every show, and that was it was cool watching their rise.
Oh yeah, we were obsessed with them. Like I was definitely obsessed with them. Like when I said to this day, like when I got Chuck from Weston to do the interview, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And he's like, and it's so funny talking to him because he's like, me? Like, why are you excited about this? I was like, dude, you're fucking Chuck from Weston. Like, what the fuck? This is crazy.
I mean, when Got Beat Up came out, I think, because that was the one after True Life Story. I mean, there was that feeling and the whole kind of East Coast scene they were in that they were gonna like really, really blow up.
Yeah.
To kind of put things into perspective, like I know Lifetime's come up a few times in your interviews and stuff, but the Lifetime record Hello Bastards, which is like literally bands made like MTV careers off of sounding like a more refined version of that record. Like when that record came out, the shows would kind of be Weston, was like Weston, Lifetime, Bouncing Souls. Like Lifetime really didn't play like strictly hardcore scene kind of shows anymore at that point. But I
Yeah.
remember like Weston was definitely more popular or like equally as popular as them. And it was like if you said in like, 6 months after Hello Bastards came out, like which band's going to be bigger? Which band's going to be the band to do that? Everyone would have said Weston. The smart money was on Weston.
Oh yeah.
And you really wouldn't have thought it, even though Hello Bastards to me was like, and I still think this way today. I mean, that to me was like the singular greatest piece of music to come out of my whole punk hardcore childhood.
Yeah, I remember buying that. And so in Dan's interview, I talk about that. Like when I first got Hello Bastards, it was at a show in, I think it was Wharton, Knights or Legion Hall or something. And you know how like those guys would used to show up with just they would sell CDs, just like it was like a mini music store at a show. They'd be in the back by the merch selling stuff like
Yeah,
Rick,
distros.
Rick, yeah, like Rick to Life would sometimes do that and shit like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we just called them distros. Yeah, they're like record distros, and they would do mail orders, and then they would bring them to the shows, like their whole selection of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I saw Hello Bastard. So I was skimming through it, and I saw that, and this I think it was Andy Spratt. He goes, "Oh yeah, you should get that. It's really great." And so I bought. I mean, the artwork was so cool that caught my attention. I remember hearing it, like I wasn't ready for it when I put it in. I was like, okay. And then Jim's Neutral Territory was like the song that like caught me because it was so catchy,
Hmm.
like with that bass intro.
Yeah.
Just like like, but the rest of it, I just couldn't. I was like, I'm not. I don't know what people are seeing in this. And it was until years later that I figured it out. It was like Braid and Framing Canvas and all these fucking bands that were out at that time. I was just like, I don't. This is such a leap from what I'm used to because I'm listening to Lagwagon and Face to Face and all this Fat Record shit or just any poppy thing. So I didn't get it until later on, like get what was going on with that record.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the bridge between maybe like Lagwagon and those bands is like a bit far, but I
Oh,
think
totally.
you get a little bit older. I think Jersey's best. I mean, because really Jersey's best dancers, they break up right before it comes out, but then
Yeah.
that record comes out and they finally start getting all of the credit and the success they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about that too. He was like, we're so bummed out. Like, it was like just no one got it until later on.
I had a hardcore radio show at my high school called Rebirth of Hardcore Pride, embarrassingly enough, but from the Gorilla Biscuits lyric. So actually, Dan came on our show as a guest. Me and my friend Paul did it, and
That's awesome.
he Paul Hanley. I don't know if he's ever come up in interviews, but he's still involved in music. He works at French Kiss Records, and they have a whole history of bands. Some people know of, and but we had Dan on our radio show, and he brings a promo copy of the record, months before it comes out, and he basically announces Lifetime's breakup on our show, and he debuts a few songs off of that record to the world for the first time.
No way. That's
Yeah. And
crazy.
I mean, they were pretty much one of my favorite bands. I have the interview on CD, and it's embarrassing because I love being like a little troll, and I ask like silly questions that are kind of needling, about song titles and silly things like that. But yeah, I was obsessed with them. I'm not just saying this because they became so popular, but like I knew how great Hello Bastards was like instantly. I was pretty what's that word? I don't know. I was pretty yeah, I was like proselytizing about how great it was when it came out. Like I couldn't believe how good it was. And it took a lot of my friends a bunch of listens. It hit no one immediately. And I think the only two reasons why it hit me immediately was the cover, because it was a ripoff of this band, the House Martins from England, who to this day are still one of my favorite bands. And it's their layout and graphic design of their album London O Hole 4. And no one
Oh my
had
God,
like
it is.
you know, I didn't even know anyone who liked the House Martins. I got into them from my older brother. It was like the only music that he ever liked that I got into, and I had another friend's older sister who liked them. So I had heard them. I was obsessed with them in high school. Like I thought they were just amazing. Like I tried to dress like while I'm in Uprise. Like when I went to high school, I would try to dress like the House Martins. Like I was crazy about them. I tried to dress like mid '80s British mod or something, and so it has this House Martins ripoff cover, and then they covered "It's Not Funny Anymore" by Husker Du, who I was also crazily obsessed with.
Okay, so a couple things right there. Number
Yeah,
one, when I said, "Oh my God, yes, it is a ripoff," that's because I Googled it and saw the image and quickly knew it. I didn't know who the fuck this band was until this time, so I'm not sure I'm gonna take any credit for knowing that. Second, yeah, I just found that out too, that that was a Husker Du cover. I never knew that until last week when I interviewed him.
yeah, but I love that song, and I think it was on their Metal Circus EP. It wasn't a song that like everyone knew. Like if they played it at a big VFW hall show that year before the record came out, like it wasn't like you would have like 100 hardcore kids pile on top of each other to sing along for it. So I just thought it was really, and I just right away the lyrics were just the best thing I'd ever heard, I just instantly loved it. And I really like proselytized about it, or whatever that word is, to my friends. I was like, you have to listen to this. Like it is the greatest thing. Yeah, and then sure enough, after a few months, everyone got into it, and then they make this great, even another equally as great record, and then disappear.
Did you get to see them when they played at Asbury in 2005?
I didn't see them there. I saw them in Philly then, I think. I saw them play like some pretty big room in Philly. I forget what it was called, but
I think they played the Truck.
I think the Troc show got moved. Maybe I just remember it was
Yeah,
like a
you're right.
relocation. It was called like not Starland Ballroom, but something,
Yeah, something with a star in front of it.
maybe Stardust Ballroom, but it was something similar to that, or like Starland Tavern or Starland Ballroom, something like like the New Jersey one, but just slightly different. But I saw them a bunch when they were out. I remember actually they played their very last show at the Melody Bar, and at this point it was a few months or longer after Jersey's Best Dancers come out. So now they're the big that they deserve to be, and it's the last show. And I think they ended up doing two shows.
Yeah.
And me and Frank Cappuccio are in New York City at a record fair, WFMU record fair, spending all of our money on like rare and collectible records. And I remember I'm like, Frank, we got to get going. Like, we got to drive to New Brunswick and see this Lifetime show. And then I just remember looking at him, and I just know he wants to keep record shopping. And he's like, I don't know, man. And it was a funny moment because I remember we were just so into fucking record collecting and like weird, obscure stuff that didn't even have to do with punk or hardcore. And like it was hard, but I remember FMU that year. There was just an amazing amount of stuff, and it's like right before eBay blew up, and it was we stuck around record shopping and missed their very last
Oh no.
show. But like, I mean,
Oh
everyone I knew,
man.
like everyone we knew and their mother was going to be there, and it would have been like great. But like I'd already seen them a lot. I liked them even before Hello Bastards, so I got to see them maybe once before that came out, and then I saw the Weston Bouncing Shoals Lifetime show that kept happening every 4 months in Pennsylvania or Philly or Jersey. They would all play together somewhere, and then we'd go see it.
Well, you can technically see that the second show, the Melody show. It's on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I found it because Dan talked about that. I found it and I like text him the video. I was like, "Hey, here's the show that someone actually has that."
Oh, I bet. I mean, that was, yeah. All the big show, all like the biggest, coolest shows from that era seem to be on YouTube.
You can find a lot of stuff on there, man. I bet. Actually, let me see. Hold on, let me just and I'm gonna wrap this up, but I want to see. I'm gonna do this in real time. Okay, Uprise, hardcore, band, NJ. Let's see if you guys are on here.
There's like 3 or 4 videos. There's a Melody Bar video. Mike Z or Frank. I know there's one video someone put in the last year or so that's like it's like we're Frank or Mike Z's quit. One of them's out of the band, so we're playing as a 4 piece. Yeah, I don't want people to watch it though. I don't know. I just feel like I was already like checked out. I saw the show and I can look at it and I'm like, yeah, man. I feel like I've whatever it was, like I've lost it. The fire that made Uprise. It was a weird show, and I totally forgot about the show. But it was at the Melody Bar. And how was your Dan Yeaman interview? I hope that was cool.
It was great. I was definitely. Oh, there it is. Yep, Uprise Melody Bar, 9/28/97. Oh, I'll have to share this link.
Please don't.
I'll definitely put it on your
Oh
landing
no.
page. It was great. It was really great. It was definitely it took a minute to make it happen because he's like still a
Yeah.
psychiatrist and he was like I got like 45 minutes in a car ride home, so it's funny because at the end I'm like, so can you still talk? He's like, I can talk a little bit. I feel like he was just being really nice, or I felt like he was like kind of enjoying reminiscing about that time, hopefully. But yeah, I was definitely nervous in the beginning talking. It's definitely you can. I think I trip over my words so many times in the beginning of the interview because I'm like,
Yeah.
But really cool guy.
Dan coming up to me at like a New Brunswick show and telling me he liked the Uprise 7-inch when I was like 16 was literally like it would be like doing a
Wow.
metal band and like Slash coming up to you and being like, "Yo, I love your band, Mama's Dungeon,
Shit. That would be so
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, Dan he was the most legit dude. He was never too cool. He was an inspiration, he still is, I think that anytime I've ever seen Lifetime doing reunions or I've run into Dan during Painted Black or something, he's just one of the most legit and amazing human beings. And I feel like the hardcore punk world is all the better for him having ever been a part of it.
Well, I think that was the reason why I was a little nervous because it's not because of like status or anything. It's because he had given so much between, like he's been so involved for so
Yeah.
long and his added so much to it between his bands and just his involvement and just his methodology and shit. That's where when I'm talking to him, I'm thinking like I feel like an idiot because I'm like talking to this guy who's done so much where I'm like I hope I don't screw up some information. And there was a couple times too where I was like, oh yeah. He's like, well, no. I was like, oh god damn it.
Yeah.
But okay, I made a note, and you earlier on you said there was the John Hiltz fight story.
Okay, yes. So
So I want to hear
in
this.
1998, there was a 2-day fest called Paperweight Fest in Wayne, New Jersey. It was at this really big like hall that the only show that ever happened there was Paperweight Fest, and like my new band Dead Nation plays like our third show there on the second day with like Los Crudos and Drop Dead. We play the more World Inferno plays, but it's more like punky and crusty punk bands. And the first day is like melodic hardcore, like and metalcore. So it's like Converge, Saves the Day, like really early, Dillinger Escape Plan, blah blah blah. So then there's this band called So I Had to Shoot 'Em, which is the dude who played in X Downfall X, our guitar player, who was a little bit off his rocker. So I Had to Shoot 'Em were very confrontational. They like just They did weird stuff when they played. And was honestly, if those guys didn't pick on me so much, I would have thought they were very cool. And I still think they were cool. I mean, Uprise played with them in like a weird like North Jersey basement show when they first started. And but yeah, so I think they had like a lamp on stage and they smashed a light bulb. And then they were like breaking mics, but they maybe they broke one of the light bulbs from the stage. But they were like this kind of like confrontational sort of noise. I don't even know what you would even call them, but they were art project noise, provocative, whatever. So they're doing something that's pissing John Hiltz off, and I think maybe John Hiltz may not be reprimanding from the stage, but at some point I think Matt Gibney, and they had two singers, and I think Matt smashed one of the lights on the stage, maybe started cutting himself with the glass or started breaking other stuff. So John Hiltz has enough and is pulling the plug on them. And apparently he went, someone will remember the story better than me. I wasn't there that day. I had to work at the grocery store because I'm playing the next day. So can't get off 2 days in a weekend in high school at a crappy job. But yeah, like, so they had this confrontation and like a fight, and it was definitely on film because I definitely saw it either on someone's VHS tape or I saw it on YouTube. But yeah, it was a very legendary event of like, I think John Hiltz putting him in a headlock, just crazy shit. So John Hiltz is legit, man. He had to deal with some really crazy people and really, obnoxious teenagers, obnoxious, entitled, bratty teenagers who want to make a statement and then kind of ruin shows or whatever. So,
Well, if someone was there and wants to email me the story, I can post it on the website because I have like those scene stories section, which I think I hid for some reason. I have to put that back up there. Yeah, I always love it when I get these emails after interviews and someone's like, "Oh, I was there," and they like give me their whole perspective, and like it's so wild that people just keep just remembering this shit, and they're like, "Yeah, there was this part too, and this is what I saw," and I'm like, "Wow, this is fucking
yeah, I
hilarious."
mean, it was a crazy story. I mean, and at that point, like, there wasn't a lot of violence at shows, and shows were kind of tame. And these kids weren't like tough guys at all. I mean, these were like nerdy kids. They were trying to be like a provocative, nerdy, almost the way like a post-punk band in like the late 70s in the UK would be, in like a kind of screamo, noise rock, North Jersey suburbs in the late 90s context or something. But yeah, their brand of provocation did not go over well, and Don Hiltz took none of their shit, and like I think literally went up to fight them.
Well done, man. All right, dude. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. I know this was like super last second, but I'm glad you like we were able to like put this
Oh,
together so
absolutely. It's
fast
it's
and
it's
do
fun.
this.
I love listening, especially to the people I knew well or knew a bit, like Rob
Yeah.
Hitt or John Cheese or Brian Malloy. Like me and Brian Malloy did a band briefly while I was in Uprise. We did like a hardcore band together where he sang and I played guitar and he sang. We billed ourselves as the Morrissey and Marr of hardcore.
Yeah, I saw on Facebook and I was looking through just like everyone's profiles during this, and it's like there's a picture of you guys at his
Yeah.
wedding,
Yeah, I
you
went
and
to his
Frank.
wedding. Me and Frank both went to his wedding because me, Frank, and Brian had the band together. It was called All Things Considered, and Brian wore his referee shirt and had a whistle, and he would call him the hardcore referee.
Wait, that I okay, I do remember seeing that.
We
Why
played
is that so
Boot and Nights.
familiar?
We
I
played
remember.
Boot and Nights on like a Laura Ladishef pop punk show.
Wait, maybe that was the show, and maybe it wasn't Uprise that played where everyone started just like floor punching. Maybe that
It
was
probably wasn't
that.
because that was our very first show. So we had a lot of friends, but I don't.
Oh no, you guys opened that show.
Yeah, that sounds about. We would
That
have
was
opened that
it.
show.
Yes, 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 yes. That you guys opened because that was the Congress of Cows show we played. I think we played after you guys,
Yeah.
and that was the first time. So, oh my God, that's I can remember this as clear as day. You guys opened because he had that fucking shirt on and the whistle, and you guys opened up, and then we went
Yeah.
on after, and then that was the first time we ever had anyone do like a mosh pit in front of us. And at
Wow.
the end of that show was when Uprise played, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, that would make sense
Yes.
because that's by that point, Uprise. If our 7 inch isn't out, we have a demo. We have a few demo tapes, like tapes of our 7 inch had gotten out further than even our demos did. Like everyone who gave a tape, any of our friends we gave a tape to, taped it for like 10 people and stuff. And you know, yeah. So we probably headlined, as an up and coming local band.
Yeah, that's when everyone lost their stuff, just like punching the floor in unison.
Yeah, we were a little
Great.
Yeah, you're like we're all little sheep at that point. You all
Oh,
do.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, what would you like to plug?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I do music now. I do kind of electro synth pop kind of stuff called Dissolve with one S, Dissolve. And yeah, I'm about to probably release my first single soon, and then an album to follow. And also that's kind of what I had. My last band was called Kissing Is a Crime, and we did one album a few years back on Don Giovanni Records, home of Chris Gethard's Comedy Records and
Oh, no
Screaming
shit.
Females and a bunch of other bands.
You can find that on Spotify. Everyone
Yeah, you
listening,
can find that on Spotify. Yeah,
Kissing is a Crime is on there.
I
Wait,
played guitar.
you put that on Chris Gethard's.
Well,
Wait.
Chris Gethard has a comedy record or two out on Don Giovanni Records. Like Don Giovanni's like a North Jersey label, originally from Jersey, and then he moved to Boston, and now he's all over the place. They put out my last band's record.
I didn't realize how involved this guy was with so much stuff until the first time I ever heard of him was the interview I did with him. He's like so like slightly not so involved, but he's like still got those like small ties to the scene, which is incredible.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. And
It's awesome.
and I think it's cool because I think a lot of people come to his comedy and then they kind of follow it backwards, and then they get into bands that he likes and stuff that he's into and stuff. And like someone I knew who was just an obsessive of his show, and this girl from Texas who I knew was like, "Oh, I just saw your band's releasing a same record on the same label that does the Chris Gethard comedy records." It's just kind of funny. Those are my things to plug at the moment.
Okay. Well, all right. So the way it ends it every time. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
I hold on to the ethics of definitely the independentness to like operate outside the major norms of the day, whatever they are, because ultimately there's a lot of outsiders and weirdos out there. And I think that's what I think more than a musical sound or a particular cultural, subcultural fashion trend. I mean, I think that's ultimately what the music and the scenes that happen are all about. It's really outsiders and weirdos and creative people coming together in some sort of way as individuals and as a collective whole to kind of pull each other up and keep expressing stuff. And I think like in my 20s, even later in my 20s, when people are like years away from doing stuff on like underground music scenes and shows, like I was still like involved in the underground like DIY scene in New York City, and it was so cool because I've been going to shows in New York City all my life, and there was finally this point in New York where there was actually like a different kind of weird subculture of bands and all ages shows and kind of illegal venues, and I was like, man, this reminds me of like just a more sophisticated version of what we did as 14-year-olds in Jersey, and I got to say it was like coming full circle, just kind of keeping this community open for weirdos and misfits and outsiders.